have this case, and in this respect, it is important to know how, let's say, the review process in plant breeding works. Let's say the papers are assigned to Jens, Leon, and me, and then we read the abstract, because a cover letter up to now is not mandatory to plant breeding. We may change this in the future, but so the abstract is of prime importance, no? It contains 225 words, and it should at least contain one sentence on the objectives of the investigation, of the experimental material, of the methods, the results, and the concluding sentence. So, and if this abstract fits to the journal, and let's say some quality also fits, then we have a look at material and methods. And then it's really important that the study is designed in a way which justifies the conclusions and the results which are presented in the abstract. And if this is the case, then the paper is sent out for the review process, means a subject editor is assigned who is a specialist in this area, and then send it out for review. And so everyone who writes a paper and will submit it to plant breeding should take this into account. And this is, let's say, the first step of writing a good paper. And then, let's say, coming to the introduction. It's just briefly revise the state of the art, and based on the literature you cited and the state of the art, clearly develop why this study is conducted, clearly name the aims and hypotheses which are behind your studies. And in this respect, an introduction is not a textbook. So limit yourself to what is really relevant for your paper. And I forgot about this. Let's say what's also important for a journal like plant breeding is novelty and originality. Because it's not worth to submit the 20th paper dealing, for example, with pyrimidine rice blast resistance genes. This is just an example where lots of papers are around on this. So make sure that novelty, which is of relevance for plant breeding, is in your paper. Coming to material and methods, it should be very precise, and the methods and the materials should be described so that results are reproducible, and let's say it should really stick to answer the question you've raised in the introduction. It's not a lab book, the material and methods. And the same holds true for the results. Present the results in a stringent manner, try to avoid duplications with figures and tables and so on. And here the same also is true. The paper is not a lab book. Not each result, which is not relevant for the topic, has to be included. And at least to the discussion, take into account only relevant literature for the results you have obtained and discuss your results critically with these results. And in the end, point out what's new for your results and how these results may be used to improve crop breeding. So, and this is all, but in the end, Susan also mentioned this, it is really important that you tell a sound story in such a paper, and that's also very important. Let's say it's always best to have a paper written by a native speaker, so take care of language and style. It's sometimes really difficult to get out of the abstract what is meant or what is the aim of this research. And that's why, although the journal has a quite small impact factor, we really have a quite high immediate rejection rate. So I think that's all from the editor-in-chief of Plant Breeding with respect to writing a good paper. Thank you.
So may I invite all the panelists to come on the stage so that we can answer questions from the floor? So we have about 20 minutes. So So don't hesitate.
Yeah, sure.
I had a question actually for all four of you, which is how do your respective journals handle prior publication in bioRxiv? And specifically, I mean prior competing publications in bioRxiv, which have not been published yet, but which may cover similar material, relevant material to a given manuscript that's being evaluated.
Yeah, in TAG, we do not have any problems. Actually, I think we will encourage soon authors that they can submit their paper to bioRxiv and then transfer it to TAG. So at least for TAG, we have no restrictions.
I'm sorry, I want to clarify my question. My question is actually if the manuscript that you're evaluating, if there's some other manuscript by other authors that is relevant to it, but which has appeared only in bioRxiv and not in print, does that impinge on the novelty? How do you guys consider the evaluation of such manuscripts?
Actually, I think that's relatively new for us. We will think about it. We were just, discussing in our last meeting how to deal with applications in bioRxiv.
We also had similar discussions in our PBJ editorial board meeting. We don't have a firm position yet, a firm policy made on that, but very similar research, published before certainly raises concerns about novelty, and so this is something that we are kind of concerned right now.
This is something we've come across on several occasions, more and more, happening more and more. Sometimes reviewers will draw our attention to something on the bioRxiv or the archive. Other times we'll find those things ourselves. So a few things can happen. If we've got a paper that's under consideration and we find that there are a couple of other papers on a similar topic, we might ask those authors if they want to submit as well. We've done that. What we also will do is get in touch with our author of our paper and say, look, there's other papers competing on the bioRxiv, so we've got to keep everything moving really fast, and we'll try and make sure our processes are fast and the author realizes that there may be, a lot of people only submit onto the bioRxiv when they're in the very late stages of a review process at a journal. Some people don't. Some people submit early, but other people do submit quite late. So we try and keep everything moving in that respect. If we have actually asked authors to discuss how their method relates to a paper, that's only on the bioRxiv, I don't think we've ever asked for a full comparison of a method unless the author has offered to do it. It probably wouldn't be reasonable to demand that, because then you'd be asking the reviewers to review another paper as well. But it is pretty often that the reviewers are the ones that bring up the fact that there is a competing manuscript, and it's an area that's under constant discussion because it's happening quite a bit.
Yeah, for us, like for TAG, this has not been a big issue up to now, but we are discussing this at the moment with the Wiley editorial office, how we will deal with it in the future. This means the point you've raised, but also the point Albrecht raised. That means the paper has been in bioRxiv before, and how we will deal with this. This is at the moment under negotiation with Wiley.
So recognizing that some countries are not native English-speaking country, so how important is language barrier to publish a paper in high impact factor journal?
let's start with the low impact factor journal. Even in low impact factor journals, language is important. And so, for example, Wiley is offering language polishing for really a reasonable amount of money. And in the end, this is important because it's not the task of the reviewers to publish to polish language. And so I think it really enhances chances to get a paper accepted if the language is okay.
Yeah, I think this is true. The reviewers, if they can't understand the paper, it's going to be problematic. So many companies offer editing services. I don't think we've ever had a paper, though, that's been in such bad shape that we haven't been able to consider sending it out to review because of language problems. But we might note that it's going to require a lot of editing a little bit further into the process, if you see what I mean. I think it probably is a good idea to make sure that at least the title, abstract, and cover letter have been edited to a reasonable degree by someone who is a native speaker, if you can afford to do that.
As you can see, I was born in Chennai and grew up here, so I'm not a native English-speaking person, but I'm the editor-in-chief of a journal published from Oxford. So I essentially have discouraged reviewers making those comments because that kind of is a discriminatory comment that only certain people or certain language native speakers can write good papers. This is part of the reason why I didn't focus much on how to write a paper, because in Plant Biotech Journal, if the language is not acceptable, then we send it, we offer additional services to improve the writing. So our focus is not on how to write the paper or how polished the language is, but the focus is on science. If it is novel science, we do everything to help the paper shaped for publication. So from PBJ perspective, those comments are really discouraging.
Yeah, in TAG, the managing editors will read your cover letter and your abstract, and if they have the feeling that the language is not at the level where reviewers are able to read it and make sense of your paper, you will get an immediate reject with the recommendation to seek help with a professional editor. Personally, since I'm also not a native speaker, and I'm surprised, when I was a graduate student in the United States, before we submitted a paper, there was a rule, it had to go through a professional editor. And these people were all native speakers. Yeah, and in Germany, at least at our university, we do not have professional editors. Nevertheless, I seek the help of a professional editor, at least if I want to go into a high-ranking journal.
I wonder if you found yourselves in situations where the reviewers' comments are very divergent, where one person says a paper is not good enough to be accepted in your journal because of either the quality of the data that you're receiving, while another reviewer says the paper is so good it should be accepted with minor corrections. And eventually, I ask this because as authors, we finally receive these divergent review comments from different reviewers, and we get ourselves in a situation where we're wondering why we have to receive these without probably the editor taking a decision before those comments came to us. Because if we receive such sorts of reviews, we don't know whether the paper was good as one reviewer says or bad as the other reviewer says. So what do you do in these high impact journals, maybe the lower impact journals, and and let these review comments reach the authors, but probably you people at other journals handle them ahead of that.
I guess I'll have a quick comment and give to Susan. One of the challenges serving as editor-in-chief is that the comments that are sent to authors, if one is positive, one is negative, that's what the authors see. But we get way more comments as confidential comments to the author, to the editors and editor-in-chief. And oftentimes authors get upset because you see, hey, you have 2 positive reviews and still it's rejected. And most of the important comments come in confidential nature. Typically, when we have 1 positive and 1 negative review, I, as editor-in-chief, encourage to get more reviews. So we do not make the judgment based on that. We take multiple reviews to decide on those.
We try to get 3 or 4 reviewers for each paper, so hopefully we're not in that position. If reviewers disagree, which they frequently do, we either circulate the reviewer reports among the reviewers anonymously, unless they want to be named, and we ask reviewer, A to comment on what reviewer B has said. If someone came back to me and just said, oh, this is rubbish, don't publish it, I would want to have a much more detailed report than that, so I'd probably get back in touch with them and say, can you give me a little bit more detail? Confidential comments to editors, and personally I don't really like that at all, and at PLOS it wasn't allowed. At the journal I worked at there, you weren't allowed to submit those comments. When we do get them, which it's probably about half to a third of reviewers that will submit those kind of comments, we quite often get back in touch with them and say, would you be willing for us to put that comment, or abridge it and put it in the report so that the authors have the benefit of that? And they usually say yes and edit it. So we try, and then we try to write a detailed decision letter if there are conflicting reports explaining what the precise reason was. So each paper's different, but we've very occasionally had to recruit additional reviewers. And that's usually when it's something that's of a very technical nature that no one really, except experts, would understand, like something to do with mass spectrometry techniques, typically, where people are disagreeing over whether the method seems robust. But yeah, we try our best to avoid comments to editors only.
Well, thanks. I think we are having great session. So related to this reviewer, and I know that I also had this problem several times being the associate editor, and I would like to have your perspective. So what happens that sometimes when the journal sends a paper for review, getting the good reviewers nowadays is a really difficult job. But when we send even to the 4 reviewers, and then we get the response from 2 or 3 reviewers, and after revision, when we say the author submits the paper to the journal, then, and this happened several times, that those agreed reviewers, they say, well, we don't have time now, so we cannot review. And then journal sent this paper to the new set of the reviewers. As a result, the new set of the reviewers started to have the new questions, and this happened with me, at least in our lab, that we had 3 or 4 rounds, and every time you are having the new reviewers. So this is really very bad. This is a very critical, difficult situation, how to handle that one. So I would like to have your perspective. Yeah, so with majority of us.
I think it depends really at which level the paper is. If there are only minor points, I think then I would encourage the editor, if the reviewers are no longer willing to have a look at the paper again for a second round, then as an editor you may be able to make the decision on your own. If there are only minor points, if there are major points, like we discussed, if there is one review accept the paper and the other one reject, and hopefully both have good arguments. I mean, first I would, of course, like to ask the reviewers, why are you voting in one case for acceptance and the other one for rejection? If this is the case, I expect as an editor-in-chief, and you know that you find if the reviewers are not willing to go for a second round, then I indeed expect that you invite a third or fourth new reviewer. Yeah, no, but then, I mean, if you want to assure the quality of your journal, I think there is no way around. And the authors have to accept this because, I mean, it's apparently not a clear point in this case.
One comment, actually, when we receive some rejection message, so one good thing is that the language is very nice. It is written like a consolatory message that, okay, work is good, but somehow it is mentioned it does not fit to our journal theme sometimes or somehow, so that's a good one. The message is good. My question is how the journals treat resubmitted manuscript once you say reject it, and the authors, they revise it or improve the manuscript and resubmit. So it is treated as the fresh one. You will treat as a fresh one, but whether you feel like, okay, we already rejected, now we need not to consider, something like that.
From PBJ perspective, if it was resubmitted, rejected, encourage resubmission, and it's considered as resubmission. But if it was rejected and then it really required a lot of additional work, then when it's resubmitted, it's considered as a new manuscript. So it depends on the recommendation made by the associate editors. So there is a clear-cut difference where there's a lot more work involved, and the whole concept need to be reestablished as opposed to making the data stronger. So reject with resubmission. But to comment on Rajiv's question about the changing the reviewers, definitely PBJ has a policy of not getting new reviewers because it will be a vicious cycle, keep going back. So we encourage seeking more reviewers in the first round to begin with, but not change the reviewers with subsequent process.
The purpose of this session is
maybe one comment from my side. Yeah, just what I would encourage authors to clearly state this is a resubmission. It was rejected, and usually you know the name of the editor who handled your manuscript, and I think it's wise to name this editor so the journal has the choice to go to the same editor, see hopefully your improvement, and it's, of course, his or her decision whether they invite the same reviewers or not.
The purpose of the session, as told by Gupta ji, to make the people more sound, more confident about writing a paper and skills, individual skills. Actually, the presentation style differs from one author to the other author based on the study. Maybe the similar studies are done by the two people, but the way of representation of the results will differ, and that will make the conveyance, that means understanding of the readers, will make more easier, sometimes more confusing, or sometimes more difficult also to understand. So, as told by our Honorable Chief Editor, see, taking the professional editors is again going to be minimizing or that means killing the talents of the youngsters or even the people who are interested to write the papers. So already we are to the basic studies like genomics and other things, we are using a lot of machines, equipments. Without that, we are unable to take out any of the DNA related or RNA related information. So if we more so depend upon the experts who are in that field, I think the talents of the people, writing skills of the people may go down. I think tomorrow robots may come even for helping us also for writing this. Thank you.
Thank you for the session. I'm a PhD student and I'm very new to research articles. But one thing I have realized is when our hypothesis gets rejected or when we do not get the desired results or the negative results, what should we do in those cases? Should the data be rejected or should it be published? What's your view on that?
So do you mean that you set a hypothesis and you've got a data set, you think the data set are robust and they prove that your hypothesis is not met? So you're going to set a new hypothesis for your research going forwards, but you want to publish the data that you've got. I think it's possible to do that if you aim for the right type of journal. So a journal like PLOS ONE, for example, has openly said that they will publish negative results. I honestly, I don't think you're going to get it into a high-impact journal, if I'm honest.
I think there is some comfort to authors because, for example, if a paper is rejected in tech, the recommendation could be, and that's up to the editors, therefore I'm looking now to Rajiv, it's up to the editors to propose the so-called transfer desk. That means your paper may not be acceptable for a high-ranking journal, but the press may have another journal where it may fit in, and then it's transferred, for example, to this other journal, for example, in our case, to another Springer journal without resubmission, and you. But this is, of course, only true if your paper has a certain quality, and it may not fit entirely the high standards, for example, for novelty. Yeah, but it must have some scientific quality.
Help desk available in Springer. I noticed that would ask you if you would like to your paper to be considered by another journal, and if you agree, then they send you a list of journals where you would like to submit, and then if you give a list of journals where you would like your paper to be published, then they will communicate your paper to the journals and ask them these journals whether they would like to consider it.
So, one question.
Yes. Yeah.
This question is actually related to the earlier question which was answered by you. So this is about taking help from professional services, professional editing services. So as you have told, because as we are not native English speakers, so we do struggle as a student to write the research articles initially. So what are the good alternatives in case we want to learn and do not want to take the help from editing services?
You see, I have noticed.
Okay.
Well, I have noticed that most of the students are interested that their paper should be published. They do not devote time in improving their writing skill. See, writing a paper is an art and a skill. This is what is written in Nature Methods 1 page, editorial. So it is an art and a skill, and all young scientists and students should develop that art and skill of writing. And if your English is not good, you should try to improve your English. I remember the case of an Indian student studying in Australia. His supervisor asked that student and arranged a coach for that student. So that student used to go to the coach every week, twice or thrice, and he started publishing it in very good journals. So you should be conscious about your weaknesses and address those weaknesses seriously, rather than writing a paper and get it rejected every time. So try to improve your art and skill of writing a paper.
I think, yeah, that's really good advice. And the other thing that you can bear in mind is that in your own lab or in the lab next door, there might be a real keen editor postdoc type that is happy to look at things. So when I was still in the lab as a postdoc, I used to edit the PhD theses for the other students, and I always used to edit people's papers before they submitted them, whether they were native language speakers or not. And we had many Europeans in my lab, actually, and someone from Malaysia. So there's usually one person who really enjoys it. So make friends with that person, yeah? And then you can learn from them.
So another way maybe, you're reading, of course, published papers before you can write your own paper. So it's not needed to reinvent the wheel new every day. So just take phrases which turned out to be good, explaining what you want to do out of these papers. Put them in use them for your English style you're writing, and this will also help. And then it's, of course, really nice when you have a native speaker in your lab. This really helps.
I think youngsters should not get discouraged. I'm from the University of Western Australia. We got a Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2005. Professor Barry Marshall on Helicobacter pylori. His first paper was rejected. Normally we tear the paper, and he kept it, so he uses that for his teaching. First paper was rejected, and he got the Nobel Prize after 20 years. Regarding the courses, most of the universities have got communication, scientific writing, etc. There are a number of nice books available, very simple way. So only way is keep writing. That's the only way to improve. Thank you.
Excuse me, sir. Just one counterpoint. You see that the focus is more on the language. And I just want to emphasize that the reviewers may say it requires professional, native speakers, so on. As I said, I have always objected to that. But language improves presentation of paper for sure. But it's the content. If one line would be on language, the rest of the page would be on content. So unless you focus on the experiments and investigational aspects, the resubmission of the paper, in all my years of experience, no single paper has been rejected just because of language. But almost all of the rejected papers were because of scientific content.
Thanks. Your hands together.
So, a few take-home message, right? Do good science, have a story, choose the right journal, and find a professional editor if needed. So I hope that it will help the audience. Okay, thank you very much.